Hello everybody, welcome back. Sorry to push you along, but we've got a big day.
We've just got some slight amendments
Yeah, we changed.
moved up and an extra one.
Yep. Okay. So here we are on item 11, the urban forest plan. Everyone's deputations, 5 minutes each. First up is Paul McMahon from Coastal Burwood, Linwood. Welcome back.
Hello again. Our community board is broadly supportive of the plan, and I guess the emphasis that we'd want to put on is we need to plant a lot more trees. There was some concern though about just the thought that go into terms of the impact that it has on infrastructure. And what the costs that might be associated with that kind of thing, and out east we have a bunch of trees like I guess everywhere in the city we have certain types of trees that have been planted that cost quite a lot to mitigate their effect on drains and that kind of thing. And the other thing is that we also doesn't appear to be any policy around what to do with tree stumps. And we have a number of areas throughout the east where there are unstable tree stumps and that kind of thing that some members, particularly in coastal, were concerned about. So, making sure that we're keeping an eye on community safety and that kind of thing around the riverbanks and that kind of thing. But yeah. Broadly speaking, we really do strongly support the aim to increase tree canopy, and just wanted to remind you of our community board submission to the annual plan where we finger pointed the Palinurus Road section, which is down for disposal, and we wanted that to be used as an urban forest. So there's a big section which is not being used for anything. It's sort of been sat there in the background. Has been used for grazing, but the council doesn't even know why it was originally acquired. And it's not suitable for housing, but it could be suitable for some kind of urban forest. So it'd be great if that could be used too. Yeah, happy to take any questions.
All done?
Yes.
Okay, has anyone got any questions of Paul? No, thank you very much, mate. That's much appreciated.
Right.
Good on you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Greg, please. On Zoom. Sorry, yes, you are right. Yes. How are you, mate? Can you hear me okay? Not. Obviously not. Are you there, Greg? Hello? No, he's not even talking.
Just while you're doing that, can we also get the page number of where the actual submissions are?
Well, shall we get Mark to come up whilst we're waiting? Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, Mark, you're on, bud. And Ross, welcome back.
Sorry, is it possible to get the page numbers of where the submissions are? Does anyone have that? Or can someone just call it out when we get... It's just really hard to find.
Yeah, the submissions of the deputations, they should be on the Victim Camp. They should be outlined.
There's 340 pages.
Yeah, those individuals who are speaking here, that should be prioritized at the beginning of the submissions list.
Okay, sure, all yours, Mark.
Just while they, I won't start the 5 minutes yet, I'll just wait for them to get their presentation correct. Back to the first slide. I do want to say though, and being in the chamber this morning, and I back up the comments of Harrison, I think the last couple of weeks have been really disappointing as a resident of Christchurch and seeing the debate that's happened in public media between councillors. I think it's councillors' behaviours on both sides of the argument and not all councillors. I think this chamber is where councillors should view their opinions and residents view theirs outside the chamber, and we get the chance here. But it just looks like you've learnt nothing from the resident survey and also the other staff survey. And I really think that councillors should view their opinions in here because it isn't a good look for our city. So the first slide says it for itself. I actually think this is the most important thing on your whole agenda today, because without trees we can't live. You know, we can talk about cycleways. Cycleways is only one component of the climate change. We've got a climate emergency, and trees, I think this is much more important. Okay, cycleways have got their point, but without trees, I say we can't live. So there's the figures of where Hornby's sitting. We estimate we're down to about 4.9%. Mia, maybe we could swap the rates rise for that, and we could have that as our tree canopy rate that we aim for, and we swap it around. This is actually next door to Ross's house, but it's an example of where we had a property that had good tree growth, spread amongst it, and now we have none. I didn't get any more of Ross's house in the picture because he was having his afternoon nap. This is another example of a section that I estimated had 20 to 25 trees on it before it was cleaned off. And the other concern here, I just raised this as a general issue, that's how when this goes in as a 2 or 3 story housing, it'll actually overlook a public school swimming pool, which I think is a major concern, and there's no legislation to stop that happening. So what I want to see I don't think the tree policy has gone far enough. It ticks a lot of boxes, it says they're not in life things, and it involves the word climate change. So you've ticked all the boxes. But what I really want to see going forward in our organisation was to see is that there is good funding in the long-term plan that backs up the tree policy that you're moving today. And one of these projects, I think, that should be given really high priority in the lowest ward, should I say it, with tree canopy rates, is to a Broomfield Common to make that the Hornby Bush, because we really do need something like that. And this was raised by a resident at one of our very first meetings. So then we move on. This is actually the motto that Hornby High lives by, and it's a good one. I'm lucky enough to work near the north-south holiday camp, and the amount of birds, the trees out there and the birds that come because of it, Aaron will know, it's a real... They've actually created this sort of environment there. Yeah. Finally, before I hand over to Ross, the tree register is one thing that we had massive problems trying to find out when a cycleway went through where the replacement trees went. So we think the tree register should be a public document, an online document that we can look up and see where trees are taken down, that we are getting the 2-for-1 replacement. It most probably is transparent, but it's not transparent to the residents at the moment. We can't look up and see if a tree's removed where the other 2 replacement trees have gone. And with that, I'll hand over to Ross.
Yeah, I've just written a wee bit here. There's a copy up at the desk. What the city really needs is a fully committed team to investigate how we can plant areas of native trees from the likes of Otahuna and or Omahu Reserve by the establishment of bush reserves along the Hallsville boundary to Hornby, then back across the back of Christchurch to the Waimak. This would ensure the spread of native bird life around the city, as well as the trees. And from here, corridors of natives can be planted back into the city to return the bird life to the city. The establishment of corridor in the inner city is not enough, and it needs to be wider spread. It has to be remembered the city does not just consider the CBD, and it's much wider. As a matter of interest, I've received a complaint regarding deciduous trees along the southwest cycleway. They're dropping leaves over the path used by cyclists and creating a slip hazard through rotting and becoming wet in rainy weather. I note someone spoke about that earlier. Perhaps council may have to consider sweeping these before ACC start receiving claims through accidents, or replacing those trees with natives which don't shed. Of further interest is the fact that it now appears that council considers low-lying shrubs or bushes as a plant that does not qualify as a tree for replacement. We've only learnt of this. Hence, many shrubs in Waterloo Road planted by residents are at present subject to removal without replacement for a cycleway. So much for zero carbon climate in this zone, right next to a rail line. Maybe it's time for a rethink. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
He's going to try to get in by the phone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
going to try that now?
Okay.
I'm just going to see if we can get Greg.
Okay.
He may be coming in by phone. No? No? Okay, shall we go to Penny?
Yep. Okay, we're just having a bit of trouble getting hold of Greg. Is Penny available,
Yep.
please? Yep. Far away, mate.
Thank you.
And Penny looks like she's speaking twice.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui o tēnei rā. I'm Penny Carnaby, Chair of the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust and also chairing the Banks Peninsula Native Forest Climate Change Group. There are two submissions this morning and I'm rolling them in together because they sort of complement each other. So the comments will be over the 10 minutes. They're interrelated. Look, we're really pleased to be able to respond to the urban forest plan. It's for the purposes of these submissions, we're talking about the parts of the peri-urban and urban parts of Banks Peninsula, so around the Sumner, Redcliffs, Taylor's Mistake, round the Port Hills, Whakarāpō Harbour, and all of the communities of Diamond Harbour, Governor's Bay and Littleton. I want to talk a little bit about the importance of the activities of the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust and the Climate Change Group. And I'm going to link it back with the Urban Forest Plan. Two things about the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust. It was been set up by landowners of Banks Peninsula who wanted to protect areas of their land, but basically didn't want to be told to do that. There would be a familiar ring. And the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust became a covenanting authority, the only independent covenanting authority, I think, in New Zealand, with all the same legal frameworks as QE2. And I make that point because in terms of the Urban Forest Plan, protection of recovering native bush is going to be really important. The other thing is the Trust brings together large collaborations of 14 organisations with the Pest-Free Banks Peninsula. And in the Whakarāpō Harbour, the Te Kahuhu Kahukura project brings together 20 organisations, including the council, all working together on restoring the biodiversity and native corridors that feed into the city. The Banks Peninsula Climate Change Group is looking at how we can sequester massive amount of carbon from recovering native forest and get a return to the landowners that are basically gifting this part of the land. So in terms of the Urban Forest Plan, look, we're generally really in support of it. Trees are a good thing, increasing biodiversity. But if I can be slightly cheeky, the narrative, I am a librarian in a previous life, the narrative could be so much more inspiring because we are doing extraordinary things in this city. And what I'm going to do is to just describe four things. Under the ecological vision for Banks Peninsula, there are 8 goals, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of us, including the council, all ticking off those goals. And one of them, goal 4, is how we connect the native corridors of native bush so that it increases biodiversity and birds and insects and all of that biodiversity can flow into the city. So take Whakarāpō, because it's a great example. We're connecting those corridors. Landowners are either gifting land or covenanting land, and we're connecting right the way around to Te Ahu Pātiki, all through that Kaituna Valley, well over 1,000 hectares of connected bush. The Te Kahuhu Kahukura project is basically, the vision is to coat the southern Port Hills with native vegetation. We have a project to plant 10,000 Tortura and podocarps. We're halfway through. These are the things. So what I'm saying here is that protection is a really important part of your urban plan, because if you protect and covenant, then it's there in perpetuity. Basically, if you've got that image just of Whakarapo, you've got those native corridors connected. And what I believe the urban plan is, and this, in some ways, the connections there, but the red zone, all of the vision for there needs to be much more ambitious. We need to connect along the Apawaho Heathcote River network, and that's a wonderful network of people, and also the red zone, the green spine. But wouldn't it be amazing if that was all connected, and we wouldn't be a garden city, we'd be a city in a forest, a native forest. So that's the first thing, protection. The second thing is, if you're going to plant or covenant or do all of those sorts of things, you've got to control the pests. It's incredibly discouraging if you've got communities out there planting. Otamahua Quail Island's an example. You know, it's pest-free. The community have planted over 1,000 trees. There's recovering native bush. The bird count there, I did a bird count with my partner 30 years ago. It's extraordinary. But the deer are coming over and clobbering it. Now, DOC's dealing with that. So I'm just saying, in terms of the urban plan, we believe you must have a pest, and you've also a weed control. So that trifecta of protection, pest control, and connecting those corridors and weeds, we're going to have an absolutely extraordinary urban forest in Otatahi. Now, the fourth point I want to make is around the Banks Peninsula Native Forest Climate Change Group. This is a group of incredibly expert people trying to get their heads around getting a return for landowners who are sequestering carbon on their land. And anyone who's had anything to do with the ETS, you take one step forward and two backwards sometimes. But what I'm suggesting here, the council have set up a really great climate resilience team under Hannah Luthwaite, and we are so excited about that as the council looks to offset its carbon footprint. But the urban plan says that you're going to do a desktop analysis of the current urban forest to locate areas that can be included in the ETS. Well, what we think is, while you're doing a great job, you've got some very, very hungry projects, carbon projects coming up at you with the stadium, with the recreation sports centre. And what we'd like to talk to you about is that wouldn't it be great if these protected areas right the way across Banks Peninsula, but the urban and peri-urban parts in the immediate future, wouldn't it be great if we, instead of the council going off and offsetting its footprint with carbon credits from somewhere else, why don't we buy local, get the return back into the landowners of Banks Peninsula, and we could have biodiversity credits, carbon credits. And when we get on to the next part of your consultation, which is the rural forest plan, personally, I think they're connected. I think we need to be thinking of connected native forests going from Akaroa Heads, it's starting now, right the way around through the Whakarapo Harper Basin, and by then it will be connecting with the heart of the city and all of the things outlined in the urban plan. I just want to finish by saying we're very enthusiastic about the plan. We think it should be much bolder. And we do want to acknowledge the fantastic work done by the Council's Parks team. We work very closely with them, the biodiversity team, and the recently set up climate change group in the Council. Thank you.
Very well done. Very well done.
you.
Thank you, Penny.
Okay.
Well done. Good. Now, I think Greg is up on deck now. How are you, mate? Can you hear me?
Good, thanks. Yes, I can. Sorry about the technical issue earlier on.
No, you're right, mate. Fire away.
So I'll start.
Yep.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. Sorry I can't be there in person. I'm in Wellington for work. Christchurch City Council declared a climate emergency and an ecological emergency more than 4 years ago. That should come as no surprise to anyone who lives at home in Christchurch. What should come as a surprise, perhaps even a shock, is the wholesale clear felling of established trees across our city. The fact that Christchurch has less than 14% tree canopy coverage, and the biggest shock of all, the fact that the tree canopy coverage targets being recommended by council staff is only 20%, and the protracted time frame for that target to be achieved. By international standards, that target falls well short of being bold or courageous. In terms of the climate emergency, they are also failing to demonstrate the necessary urgency to which action is required. In North America, American Forest is the oldest national non-profit conservation organisation in the United States. They championed the creation of the US Forest Service and persuaded Congress to provide stable funding and launch the Tree Equity Score, a tool which is used to help US cities measure and expand their tree cover. In 2010, the national average tree coverage of major US cities was 27%, a figure twice that of what we have in Christchurch and far greater than the targeted mere 20% goal currently being set by our council. With their deep knowledge, American forests have recommended an average of 40% tree coverage across cities in the US. That's 40%, not 14, and have a target date set by 2030 to achieve that, more than 40 years ahead of that of Christchurch. New York, Denver, Shanghai, Ottawa, Los Angeles, and numerous other cities across the globe have all unveiled initiatives aimed at greatly increasing their urban forests because of the ability of trees to reduce city temperatures, absorb carbon dioxide, and soak up excess rainfall. Closer to home in Melbourne, Australia, a city which currently has a land area twice the size of Christchurch, has a population 13 times larger than ours, and an existing tree canopy coverage of 22%. They too have set themselves a target to increase their tree canopy coverage to 40%. They plan to achieve that by 2040. In our sister city, Adelaide, the council there have set the following targets: to boost tree coverage in areas that only have 20%, to boost tree canopy coverage by 20% in areas which currently have 30% tree coverage, and to do so by 2045. And for areas who currently have more than 30% tree coverage, for that to be maintained and to ensure no net loss. In Christchurch, however, the first major city in New Zealand to have declared a climate and ecological emergency, so-called Garden City, the target set under the advice of council staff, as mentioned, is only 20% tree canopy coverage. The target date set is not within the next 20 years like cities elsewhere. No, the target set in Christchurch is not for another half a century. In simple terms, that equates to taking more than twice as long to achieve half as much. Now, I wonder how many of those sitting around council's table today will be, how old you will be in 50 years, and if any of you will actually still be alive. Professor Tim Nash of Victoria University, when interviewed by TVNZ about climate change, said, "It's frustrating that we almost have to be punched in the face before we take it seriously. We're hurtling towards a tipping point, global temperatures rising by 1.5 degrees. The big question for the council, the mayor, and elected members is to ask, are the targets being recommended by council staff really taking the emergency seriously? The other questions to be asked are, since declaring the emergency, has the City Council acted at pace? Are the tree canopy goals and targeted dates of this council aspirational? Do they measure up to international standards of your peers?"
Greg, have you got a sorry, mate? Have you got a video that you want to play as well?
There is, yep.
Okay.
I'll just finish the rest of my oral submission in the video. You've demonstrated courageous action in the past. It's time for you to do the same today in terms of tree protection and tree retention throughout the built environment, in terms of planting avenues of trees rather than just focusing on planting trees in existing green space, and most importantly, for the tree canopy coverage of our city to be increased right across Christchurch. If you can now play the video, it'd be appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you.
Warriors, doctors for the environment. Weather health warning. In Western Sydney, there aren't enough trees and it's killing people.
People are actually literally dying from heart attacks, from heat exhaustion, from complications of medication that happen at high temperatures. And this is happening on a much bigger scale than people realise because it's really a silent killer.
And to prove the point, on a scorching summer's day just 2 weeks ago, the doctors compared the temperatures of two parallel streets in Turngabby. Bulli Road, with hardly any trees, hit 49 degrees. 100 metres away, Favell Road, lined with mature shade trees, the mercury reaching 29 degrees. That's 20 degrees difference.
You're here in Bulli Road. Does it get hot in summer?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
Do you think more trees would be a good thing? The more trees you have would cool things down?
Definitely, any shading that we can have would cool the area, absolutely, yeah.
Trees can be the difference between life and death.
With so many new suburbs being stripped of trees, the doctors group is concerned people are isolating in air-conditioned cocoons, not great for the environment or their mental health.
If it's too dangerous to walk outside, it's the mental health of the community that's really impacted.
The doctors group has teamed up with the Worldwide Fund for Nature to highlight the ecological and health benefits of trees. New suburbs with barely any room for trees and homes with dark roofing are spreading across the west and southwest.
More people die each year from heat waves than from all the other disasters combined, and trees are one of the ways that we can really reduce people's exposure to heat.
Mark Burrows, 9 News.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Greg. That was a very good
Thank you.
presentation.
I realise that's Australia, but I mean, the temperature's rising internationally. We can't afford to get.
Okay. Thank you once again. Good on you.
Thank you. Cheers. Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Graham McCarrison.
Yeah, so here we have Graham from Spark, please.
Morena. My focus for this morning is around infrastructure and the impact of trees on telecommunications cell towers. So we support the urban forest plans, and these are becoming a really good initiative across New Zealand. But trees in the street need to be thought about as to their root structures and also how tall they're going to get, so that when they're in front of infrastructure.
Who's this person?
Sorry. All right, so I'm Graham McCarrison from Spark.
No, that's right. Just
Mute her, Rinka.
we can mute her.
Everyone on Zoom is muted.
Okay.
So
Far away, mate.
Going back, so this is about trees. So in the submission, there was a nice little diagram about the impact that trees, buildings can have on cell phone coverage. So it's not about not having trees, it's about having appropriate height trees near infrastructure or providing for pruning of trees within annual plan budgets. It's that simple. It would have been nice that infrastructure was part of the development of these sort of plans. Always my message, I was here giving a presentation on telecommunications to Greater Christchurch Partnership yesterday, and if you think about the messages for telecommunications, it's about our data. So telecommunications becomes the most important thing we have going toward supporting climate change initiatives. If you're thinking about tree protection, start to put in little electronic tags within them, start monitoring how they're growing and all those sorts of things as one data source for that. So it's as simple as that. The recommendations are in my submission. We're here to kind of help, looking forward to being part of the technical group, looking about appropriate trees. Telecommunications shouldn't be forgotten when public documents are being prepared. That's me knocking on the door regularly because we've not been part of your engagement processes or get invited late. So,
Thank you, Graham. You got Tyler wanted to have a question. And
Yeah, I just wanted to know about your future plans in regards to your infrastructure requirements. I know that a major competitor is obviously going alternative ways. What does Spark look like going into the future?
If we're talking satellites, we're all doing the same thing. So satellites are complementary technology to what's on the ground, so fibre and poles. So Spark yesterday and last week announced partnerships with SpaceX to do a similar coverage footprint, but also using links as well. Sorry, so the reverse of that, links for our coverage footprint, same as 2 degrees. Yeah, so yeah, it works well for Canterbury.
You're right, Tim. You done? Yanni?
Just two quick questions. One is, have you been involved in the review of our infrastructure design standards around?
No.
Right, okay, so that's...
We would like to be.
Okay, and then the second question is, do you think, given the proliferation of telecommunications utilities and poles,
yep,
is there a way going forward where you would see greater degree of alignment with just having one resource rather than every company having their own resource? Because it does seem like quite a proliferation of the same type of utility that takes up valuable space on the footpath where we could be putting trees.
Totally. So in the last 6 months, you will have seen One New Zealand, so Vodafone, have announced and set up their own pole company. So the sale of their pole and cabinet assets, passive assets, Spark and 2 Degrees have done the same. So the 2 Degrees deal hasn't been completed, but is close. It's going into a company we set up, which is called Connexa. The aim of those pole companies is about amalgamation, getting more co-location, working with developers around finding a single or multiple sites to have 3 providers, lots of IoT stuff on there to provide that. And as we start looking forward, hopefully it'll mean less poles in streets. But if we can get beside developers and Kaungora in particular to sell this antennas to be part on top of the buildings, basically, so you don't need pole infrastructure in these very densified environments. So yeah, that's very much part of our agenda. So.
Thank you, mate. That's a great answer. Thank you very much for your presentation. So next we have, I think on Zoom, Jackie and Bethany. Have I?
Kia ora koutou. I am Jackie Howard from the Sticks Living Laboratory Trust. Bethany will not be joining me today, unfortunately, so I will get things going. As I mentioned before, at the Sticks Living Laboratory Trust, we were founded on the Sticks vision document from 2000 to 2040 to create a living laboratory in the catchment, and we also support the remaining 4 visions for the catchment. Next slide, please. So for our general comments on the submission, in general, we do support the urban forest plan, and in particularly, we strongly support their overall plan of council to prioritize and encourage planting trees. We specifically support the targeted canopy cover over waterways, as this is vital to river ecosystem success, and canopy cover over waterways increases native animal abundance, reduces evaporative loss, and naturally controls pest plants. So prioritizing this will be a quick win for the city. We also support the focus on partnering with community groups and local landowners to accomplish planting goals, as it supports local communities and extends the value of council's contributions. And lastly, we also support the commitment in Objective 4.1 to promote community planting days. And we find this quite successful in our catchment, getting the community involved. For our recommendations, we strongly suggest that council consider the following. One moment. So we can suggest that planting native tree species should be more strongly and consistently emphasized in the plan. Planting exotic trees brings long-term consequences, such as spreading exotic seedlings into restored areas, and providing resources for introduced birds and insects that native species often fail to benefit from. This is contrary to the plan's goal of providing long-term benefits. By planting native trees, this will help build a sustainable native bird, insect, and plant community. Currently, most dedicated goals around native plantings are in Objective 2.4, which we feel separates out native planting goals from the broader planting tree effort. These goals should be incorporated into the planting guidelines in Section 1. Objective 1.1 and 1.2 should also include a goal to encourage the planting of native trees over exotic trees wherever native trees would accomplish the same goals. We also strongly suggest that the council consider acquiring land along the Puhatakikanui and in the red zone. This will allow high value areas of urban forest to be established early, thus connecting native planting corridors, shading waterways, and providing continuous habitat for native animals. Additionally, this will improve public access to urban forests and support the completion of a source-to-sea walkway. And overall, we think this would be beneficial in relation to the overall health and rehabilitation of the Puhatakikanui itself. And that is everything on my end. Are there any questions?
No, there is not. Thank you very much. You've done a fantastic job, and thank you for the time and effort you put into your submission.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, so next we have Georgina Stanley on.
Nope, she's
Nope,
coming
there
down.
she goes. I was going to say on Zoom, but it's not.
All microphones. Okay, this is my first time submitting in decades. So I'm here on behalf of Smith Street Community Farm Trust. We're a Eastern Suburbs Trust that's looking at food resilience. So for us, we would like you to consider planting more fruit trees. It's a really awesome opportunity to plant more trees in our city, and as it's a city, we have fruit trees and nut trees provide recreational opportunities that we see in the red zone, but it would be nice to have more of those spread all throughout the city. So utilising our community parks more effectively for fruit and nut trees would be a really huge win for the community. And considering Christchurch's 15% of our city is food insecure, it would be really awesome if we could tag the amount of trees that we're going to plant to that food insecurity. So I would really like to see 15% of all new trees planted being fruit and nut trees. Because landscape intervention has a tangible effect on food insecurity. Food insecurity is located in place. So if you live in a suburb, you can, and you're wealthy and you move in, you'll be more likely to be food insecure if you move into certain areas. So making impacts in certain locations will really actually have a huge impact long term on our city's food insecurity. So that's what I'd like to see. Or, yeah, questions?
Tyler, please.
Kia ora, thank you. Any locations of interest that you'd like to talk about?
We're at Eastern Suburbs Trust, so we're little, so we can only spread so far, but there really are quite good maps out there already about where food deprivation indexes are. So aligning, doing some, having your urban forest plan having some social benefit and aligning those two, that would be good work.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Tim.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a shame that the trees that were planted in along Manchester Street, they're not kumquats. I had a talk with Tina about it a while ago. There's something that the rats like them, but you can't really do much with them. But I'm just wondering what bushes and things like that, because you look at all the variety of berries and things. So if we looked separate to this, but looked at a vision for sustainable food.
Yes.
Would that be something to, because I mean the berries, it's just so much bush-wise, depending on how you define a tree, because it looks like a bush.
The urban forest plan, you really need a 3-metre tree to hit a carbon target. But long-term around parks planning, I think that there's an opportunity to create edible parks, edible community parks that have more of a sustaining sort of value to a community. So
And I suppose with regards to carbon reduction, all those people buying those packets that get delivered.
Yep.
If you look in England and the amount of traffic that's put on the road from sales by internet is insane. So
Yeah,
thank you for that.
yeah, that's the if you can produce food locally within inside your city, you're going to have an impact on your carbon production, carbon consumption of a city long term. So yeah, it's a win.
Thank you, Celeste.
Hi, Georgina. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on the concept of edible neighbourhoods.
They're great ideas. So I think that the trick is with edible neighbourhoods, and we've been doing a bit of research into the community because everywhere you go, you really want to be able to plant trees or put food where people are going to access them. We looked at streetscapes, and people are uncomfortable with having a blend between fruit trees on their front yard and fruit trees on the pedestrian walkway side, because it means people can access their property when they don't want that to happen. So there's security issues around that. So linking an edible landscape up into a suburb would be specific nodes would be probably the most, what's looking like the community is saying is what they want the most. So that would be your little pocket parks and community parks. So it's all located in one area, and that people can access, so all your information about how to harvest and how to plant, all of the things are in one spot. Yeah.
And do you think it would be useful to do that as part of our suburban master plan?
Oh, it'd be lovely.
So one example would be in the New Brighton Mall, some of the businesses have taken it upon themselves to put in gardens with plant herbs you can pick, and they use it in the restaurants, which I think is great. But
it is
expanding that vision further.
Definitely, that's a partnership between commercial enterprises and streetscaping. So there have been a few people involved in doing edible streets, so planting on their berms, and what they've found is that the neighbourhood doesn't access it as much as they thought they would, because there's perceptions and also risks around dog feces and people, pollution from the streets. So you'd probably want to put fruit and edibles in quieter streets, or like Brighton, which is a pedestrian primary space.
Thank you, Georgina.
So,
That's very good.
Sure you're
doing a good job.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for what you do down there. It's great. Okay, so Lionel, please.
I'll be speaking as the provincial president for North Canterbury Federated Farmers submission. So in all, we do support the aspects of the plan in terms of its vision. Our big concern is really about the mention of the extension of the plan to cover rural land on Banks Peninsula, and the fact that this would really need to be done with consultation with rural landowners and users. But we actually don't think there is a need to have the extension, especially given that the rules there currently are designed to protect vegetation, i.e. vegetation clearance rules, and to protect and encourage biodiversity in the area. There doesn't seem to be any consultation so far with the rural community in terms of this. In Appendix 2, where you state how you've developed the plan, you say that you set up a working group to assist with developing the plan, and workshops were held with various interested parties. If the plan was to include rural areas, then consultation with rural landowners and users is needed, and it doesn't appear to have been done. And like I said, the goal 1 to plant, we state that rural land use for the rural area of Banks Peninsula is currently about, in 2018-19 was 11%, and that by 2030 and 2070 you wanted to see that at 12 and 15% respectively. There's just no sort of discussion or justification about extension of an urban plan and to cover the rural areas. Any questions?
But not. No, apparently not. Oh, sorry. Yep, Sarah, please.
So, based on that, when you look at the urban forest plan, so it's planned mainly for the urban area, which wording or which parts of that do you have the problem with and that you would be looking for changes in?
So the main one is obviously in table 1. It's 1.4 of the goal one is obviously about developing a rural, extending this to the rural sector.
Yeah.
What's the justification for that is the question.
Okay, so if that was a goal that said, while the wording is that, if the meaning of that was to then develop a plan in conjunction with the rural community for the rural area, would you be happy with that? Because at the moment it's just a brief thing that says extend it. But if that meant develop a new one in conjunction with those people, that would be okay?
I think that there would probably be more respective, having
thanks.
a completely separate plan for the rural sector of that.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, certainly consult extensively with rural landowners and rural land users.
Yeah.
Good question. Okay. Righto, so that appears to be all the questions. Thank you very much for coming in.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, is Clive here, please?
Thank you.
Good to see you, mate.
Good morning. My name's Clive Parris. I'm submitting on behalf of the Avonhead Community Group. The ACG is a neutral, non-political, entirely voluntary residents organisation representing approximately 8,000 households in Avonhead and the surrounding suburbs of Russley, Burnside, Brimmer and Ilam. Our role is to liaise with government and non-government organisations to ensure sustainable development in the area that it represents, in which the local community is at the forefront of decision making and development. At the outset, the summary of feedback circulated by Council on 2nd of June 2023 does not include any reference to the proposal for participatory management of canopies in the ACG submission. We felt it was disappointing because it indicates to us that the Council was already determined not to take our submission into account. And I'll use this hearing to explain our participatory management position. Fundamentally, the ACG wants the community or communities to be at the centre of management of tree canopies and urban forests, which means A, there needs to be a mechanism for residents to notify the Council of issues with maintaining existing tree canopies or urban forests, which triggers the process of Council assessing the issue and addressing it. B, when new plantations are contemplated, local residents should have an opportunity to provide feedback on the type of vegetation proposed, and factors such as the potential for allergic responses and respiratory issues should also be taken into account. We're mindful of the costs of undertaking consultation and propose that the Council pilots a community-driven feedback gathering process whereby local community groups are given the responsibility of collating and passing on feedback from local residents. The Council can develop checklists and other processes to monitor the integrity of the feedback gathering process, but should leave the implementation to community groups in order to minimise the cost to the Council staff itself. And further, the Council should trial community management of vegetation where the local community groups express interest in this. Areas of vegetation that can be safely managed by local community groups should be handed over for community management with the Council monitoring process. Any such maintenance activity should be voluntary, albeit with the Council providing necessary resources for the purpose. The ACG considers that such an initiative would save on contractor costs, which can be significant if the pilot projects are successful and are taken up by more community groups in other areas. And finally, the ACG requests that the Council takes on board its proposal to trial community management. The ACG would be willing to collaborate with the Council on developing and participating in any pilot project. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for coming in, Clive. Just one in terms of the quantum of the management, so to speak. So
I'm just thinking in like an our area. Are you thinking the smaller parks as such where you'd be planting, or Avonhead Park, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, smaller areas. Like we need to address in recent times, get rid of issues such as Tall Trees Avenue and Kettleston Drive.
Yep.
Issues that we had there.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's really useful. So it's not just
And
parks as
in
such.
days gone past, the cemetery issues with the gum trees.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's really useful. We might just flag that Andrew to have a couple of questions at the time. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Clive. Just a quick question for you.
You're popular.
Yeah, I'm just interested in your view on the responsibilities that we have as a city. Do you think it sits primarily with the Christchurch City Council or the residents in terms of tree canopy over the city?
I think it's obviously both. I mean, it's participatory. We've got to be collaborative with it, and you've got to take the community with you when you do these things. The Parks and Reserve do an amazing job, and it's a huge job, and we get complaints every other week about grass not being cut or trees not being cut down or whatever. But
so you're saying kind of like
take the community with you.
You're saying like 50-50 responsibility, individuals to plant trees in their backyards and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I don't know if it's 50-50, but just so long as if you can get local agreement within the communities itself. There's always going to be people in the community that are not going to work with you.
True. All right, thank you.
Oh, just one last one each. Listen, we sometimes get residents coming to us, often older in life. We've got large street trees, and we know that the benefit, and we've seen it in the video earlier, of having large street trees for the community as a whole in the neighbourhood. But sometimes they have impacts on individual properties, leaf litter, those kind of things. Do you think that there's a community way to help deal with that, as well as the stuff that's in parks and things? Because the street trees is often where we get the most conflict rather than the stuff that's in parks.
You get conflict in streets when there's a group of people together. But if you only need 2 or 3 people to agree to convince the rest of the community how to go about it.
Yeah.
And if you have strong groups, like Avonhead Community Group's quite strong.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of agreement within the group, and it's not hard to pass that on. And then if you take the council staff with you, it's not hard to get agreement.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if we could do something on that. Yeah.
We just need to work closer with the parks and we do it with the cemetery group. And we've got an amazing relationship with the park ranger and those that administer that.
Yeah, but even at a street level, helping residents who are struggling with the leaf litter and stuff to help maintain the community appeal and stuff. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, sure, I can.
And I didn't have my speaker on. Arinka and Robin, can you hear me? Press your mute button, mate. No, you're on mute. You're on mute.
They should.
Is that it?
We should be able to hear them now.
Can you?
I think they've put mute on it now.
Yep. Yeah, there you go. Far away. We can hear you.
We're on. Okay, thank you. Does the next one?
Now turn off what? Your cell phone.
No, it's not my cell phone.
Okay. Start. Yep.
Hello?
Yep. Go for it. No, that is it.
Okay. Okay, this is Arinka and Robin.
Hang on, have they got another device open?
Yeah.
Ask if there's a computer going. Yeah.
I thought it was cell phone. Yeah.
Technology. You've turned it on. Hello?
our end, isn't it?
There's something else turned on at your end that we're getting back feed with.
Okay, shall I go mute?
No, can't hear you, mate.
Mute. Wait on, unmute over here. It's not mute. Yeah. Okay. It's not working. Okay. Not sure why. What should we do? Yeah, no, it's unmuted.
Yep.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
Okay, you start talking and we'll see what we can come up with, because you've got a presentation there as well, I think.
Okay, can you see us now or what?
It's good.
Just go.
Just go. Okay. So basically we support the urban forest plan, but it is important to keep all the mature trees and gardens. We already have, for all the obvious reasons, for shade, oxygen, bird life, mental health. Trees are, the deciduous trees are important as they lose the leaves in the winter, letting the sun in the winter, leading the sun and shading the summer. People's personal gardens create beautiful streetscapes that members of the public can also and keeping the very important garden image for our visitors and tourists to enjoy. Council needs to have checks vision in place. We notice that the 20% recommendation for green developers is being largely ignored, and by not providing car parking will create unintended consequences in the future. E.g., women and children will be unsafe walking to their cars. Congestion will increase as cars circulate, battling for car parks to the city, creating more pollution and congestion as pointed in recent press reports. Green spaces and private gardens have been found to be important in assisting with water dispersion to avoid flooding. Is that better?
Yes.
Must be yours. Your fault.
No, it's not our end.
The older properties also have found an important role. Green spaces and private gardens have been found to be important in assisting with water dispersion to avoid flooding. The older properties have also an important role to play and need protection from indiscriminate development. It is great that there are now some protections for heritage gardens and areas, but more needs to be done. The planning permissions for these properties is the responsibility of the council, who should not allow developers to cut corners. We agree with identifying heritage trees for protection, which they used to have. We agree with the red-green zone as a special place and should be preserved with limited development, as it is an amazing sacred place as it is. A memory of the sacrifices people had to make as a result of the 2010-2011 earthquakes should not be diminished. We support this plan and look forward to continuing liaison with the council on the very important matter of shaping the future of our city. Okay, so just, the council needs to have checks and balances to assist developers to keep the vision in play. We noticed that 20% of the recommendations for green space for developers being largely ignored, and by not providing car parking will create unintended consequences for the future. E.g., women and children will be unsafe walking too far from their cars. And congestion and pollution will increase as cars circulate looking for car parks and access to the city. So that was basically the first couple of paragraphs that was echoing around. And that's really it. Robin is going to sort of cap what I have to say, and
Well, I think it's very important to keep the mature trees we already have. There's several reasons, historical reasons, heritage. I mean, they were planted by our forefathers. Do we respect those forefathers? We should. I'm sure most of us do. And that's our way of respecting and remembering them, especially along the Avon River banks. It's very important to keep those mature trees. It's more important to have mature trees than avoid having them.
Right, and just about the photos that you can see up on the wall, that's sort of the before and after of two different properties that show what was there and then what was there afterwards, and how many trees and gardens have disappeared just from those two properties, and it's happening all over town. The one property that you see there with the green space in front of it is an older, I think it's a council or housing complex that has that's left a green space there, somewhere for the children to play. So preserving the green spaces are very important, and also the fact that private gardens are also just as important to keep and preserve as part of the tree canopy.
And we are the garden city. People come here to see our garden city. We don't want to lose that wonderful reputation by cutting down mature trees.
Okay, thank you very much. It was a wee bit difficult at the start. We're certainly hearing you loud and clear now, and thank you for the effort that you went to. Good on you. Thank you. Okay, Marie. Welcome.
Kia ora koutou, nei rā te mihi mai o hā kia koutou. And I'm Marie Gray. I've spoken a number of times from the Summit Road Society. We own 4 reserves on the Port Hills and run Predator Free Port Hills, a community trapping project. And we have a very long relationship with Port Hills Ranger Service. We do support the overall direction of the plan, but would like to see it bolder, more ambitious, and in particular resourced. The council does have a lot of really good plans, but then those plans need to be resourced through the long-term and annual plan process. With our focus on the Port Hills, we would really like to see the restoration of the gullies of the Port Hills, important for biodiversity, sedimentation, and increasingly as our climate warms, around climate resilience. We need to set the conditions for nature to take over. So in places where there's seed source, that means fencing, but in most of urban Christchurch, including the city side of the Port Hills, that's around planting, large-scale planting. And the other thing I really want to emphasise, that when you create forests, you can't just have the capital investment in planting, but actually ongoing maintenance in the form of pest control and weed control, because they are the biggest threats to established ecosystems. In urban areas, we'd like to see that supported with mini forests, green corridors, backyard biodiversity, and street trees as well, focusing on natives. That's something that we really prioritise. And all of these work together to create this canopy cover, because the landscape scale projects are what provide the main habitat for our native biodiversity, and then they spill over into the city through these little pockets of biodiversity around the city. We are very much in favour of initiatives that support kaitiakitanga, and providing opportunities for community groups to undertake native planting, weeding, predator control in their local reserves. The urban forest plan is a very good start. It just needs to go a lot further. As an example, we would like to see the financial contribution process move from 20% to 25%, and that's just a start. Actually, it would be good to see this go a lot further in time as well. We would really like to commend the efforts of the park rangers. They are extraordinary. And their effort to plant trees across the Port Hills, the red zone, across the city and Banks Peninsula. The council is a signatory to Te Kākahu Kahukura, a landscape scale restoration project. I think that might have been mentioned earlier, possibly by Penny, around restoring and connecting 1,000 hectares of native bush on the southern Port Hills. And that's really about providing that opportunity for spillover. So then that needs to be supported by a kind of whole lot of community and council initiatives and private landowners on the southern Port Hills, from Taitapu around to Victoria Park and over the harbour side as well. So I think that sums up the key points. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this submission. Kia ora.
Thank you very much. Anyone got a question? No. Thank you very much for taking the time and effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Colin.
Kia ora, many friends. Want to support the forest plan and to for it to be more ambitious. We've got a rich and very valid history of recombination. We want more nature and more of our deep natural heritage in the urban environment. We want more kowhai for a city of golden winters, to attract the koremako of bellbirds and tui. I think there needs to be more oversight, amongst developers and consultants, contractors, to make sure we're getting the right balance there. We do want native first, and greater than 50% of our prominent native trees as being native. We're facing the 6th great extinction in the world. So in a sense, this is not negotiable. We've signed up to international agreements on biodiversity. So visibility is critical because extinction of experience leads to extinction of species. If we don't have it in our daily lives, then it becomes invisible and no longer relevant to our identity. Forest is an ecosystem and it feeds our critically endangered wildlife as well. So why can't we have our native forest front and centre, right here in the centre of the square, feeding out of the chalice which reflects our ancient buried forests? I've spoken to many community groups over the years about all of this, and they love this kind of a concept. So why can't we just get on with it? We have a spatial plan for landscape connectivity of patches and stepping stones, and we can incorporate big and little patches across the city. Groves of nature in all of our parks, such as this award-winning pocket park concept from the Ellerslie Flower Show some years ago. And our corridors that join up all of these stepping stones. Don't believe that we don't have lots of native trees that are suitable for our streets. Visibility is critical. And of course, our rivers side tree corridors can also be designed to reflect Te Tiriti. We could do this much better. This was a part of the original plan for the inner city Avon River, but it was kind of passed by for incorrect reasons. And we've got a whole range of native species that are suitable to this kind of environment in which it feed our wildlife. We know how to do it and we know how to mitigate any problems. And don't misunderstand the preliminary results, which sort of imply that only 10% support native trees. But in fact, the Christchurch City Council's own random citizen surveys in 2003 show that 58% of citizens wanted more native plants in their neighbourhood, and only 2.9% wanted less. 72% wanted more native birds in their neighbourhood, and our birds need our plants. One of the other critical issues to consider is biosecurity. We need to be culling and not expanding the number of some of our very serious weed threats in the city. I'm going to suggest that we're a city of multiple Ks. You can read them all there. And one of the most critical ones and very distinctive for Canterbury Plains and Otautahi Christchurch or Karaitiana is Kowhai. And this can produce that city of golden winters, which feeds our important nectar-feeding birds. I'll give you this free brand for free. You don't need to spend another $1 million on branding the city. This will also feed into the National Park City strategy. And finally, I want to, whoops, what happened there? Finally, I just want to shout out for our lovely cabbage tree, our tikoka, and to love the wonderful silhouettes that it creates against our wonderful skies. Kia ora.
Thank you. Now, Tyler had a question that's going to last about 7 seconds. Far away.
Kia ora, Colin. Absolute pleasure. I'm just wanting to get a bit more. I wanted to question your thoughts on developers and providing more of an oversight on the development of native trees within our city. Can you provide some insight into that?
Yeah, I think we need to have a stronger, rule about losing native trees and native trees, big trees, which are important carbon sinks, on all our properties. Not to just sort of wipe out and clear out, scorched earth kind of policies. We need to kind of police that a little bit more rigidly and, allow houses and developments to occur around those and to protect what's there. But also to have more stringent replacement rules that reflect the age of the tree that's been lost. You can't just replace a 100-year-old tree with a 1 or 2 year old seedling, but multiply that up to 50 trees to replace a 100-year-old tree if it's really got to go.
Thank you, Colin. That's great answer. Thank you very much. Right, now we're getting towards the end. Mark, please.
Hello.
Afternoon.
Right. Can we start on the first slide, please? This is the last one. Thank you. Okay, look, I want to talk about the foundation of this whole conversation. And it starts when our forebears settled the city. So please look at the first slide. And what you'll see is a map of Christchurch to be, a map made in 1848. And in the centre of the map, you can see the town of Stratford. They hadn't even put the name Christchurch in the right place. If you've got good eyesight, you'll see it's at the head of the harbour. It wasn't built there. But Stratford beside the River Avon, and in that surrounding area, the map is entirely blank. Well, except for the jewel of Riccarton Bush, which is the tiny piece just to the northwest corner of the location Stratford. And just to the north of that is another tiny patch of bush, Papanui bush, long erased from everyone's memories. And if you go down towards the Port Hills and you drill down on this map, you'll see other tiny remnants in the hills and further out on the peninsula edge of native bush, tall forest. But essentially, Christchurch, in its moment of creation, was a blank slate. There were no trees, hardly to speak of. It was a barren. If you were into trees, you would have despaired coming here. And our early settlers were greatly challenged. The city was exposed to every element of weather without any protection, without any amenity. And the people who first settled the city were tree enthusiasts.
Next slide, please. And this is a view from the Port Hills showing the city a few years after its establishment. Still barren. You can just see Ricton Bush. You can just see Hapanui Bush before it's erased. And beyond that, way across the plains, Wood End Forest, or Wood End. Next slide, please. And here we are today. Here's a view from Kashmir, looking across the city. It's an oblique view, and it looks like a continuous canopy. Wow, what an extraordinary achievement. In just under 175 years, the city landscape has been utterly transformed. Next slide, please. Now let's drill down on a bit of detail. Here's an Apawa street-side image of tall, introduced trees. Next slide, please. Here's a familiar view in our beautiful park where people can walk through and experience being amongst and underneath large, beautiful trees and with much colour. Imagine Christchurch without its autumn colours to cheer us as we face with some dread the onset of winter, which is rather tough. The colour our introduced trees, our big introduced trees, bring to the city help define its character and make it a pleasant place to live in. Next slide, please. And in winter, the large deciduous trees allow their light through, and if you're into trees, hey, you can look at the detail of their architecture, which is another impressive story. I just want to make the point that all trees, for the benefit of this planet, are native to the planet. And this notion, this rabbit hole of eco-sourcing is actually ecologically a nonsense. We live in a world which, and we ourselves, all here, from diverse places, origins around the world. And this focus, this narrow focus, is a misleading conversation. Next slide, please. Here's an example of integration. A beautiful Kareru. It's surrounded, festooned by wild rose, the blooms of wild rose. It's sitting on a silver birch. It happens to be in my garden. These beautiful birds and other wonderful birds will come back into our city if we have a sufficient presence of trees of size and stature which provide safe nesting, safe roosting, safe habitat for eating. And the Kareru, incidentally, its favourite food, you must observe if you're into Kareru at all, is the introduced tree lucerne, which came from the Canary Islands by accident with the very, very first ships that came to Christchurch because they put their livestock out to graze on the Canary Islands on their route to Christchurch in 1850. And the wilding tree lucerne around the city is a primary source of food during the winter, tough months, for the Kareru. Okay, now through to my remainder of my presentation.
How are we going there, Mark?
How are we going for time?
Yeah, we're not doing too flash, but you're doing all right.
All right, thank you very much. Look, just in terms of the Christchurch Civic Trust and its concern about the future of the city and this wonderful opportunity with focusing on an urban forest plan. We urge a continuing emphasis on large trees of presence in the city, and including introduced deciduous trees. We're also keen to see a refugia for rare trees in the world, because the world's treedom is under threat as well. And Christchurch is already an important refugia for some species which have become extinct in their places of origin.
Thank you, Mark. Have you got much more to go?
Just a couple of other things.
Okay.
We would also like to see in the red zone an arboretum of all representing all the trees in the city, the full diversity of trees that we have. And look, right down to the bottom, I'll say this, that the public health benefits of tree cover are well known, and they're in proportion to the scale and size and density of the trees. And social equity requires increasing the benefit of tree cover for the entirety of the city. At present, we have the privileged, wealthy, leafy suburbs, which were predominantly treed early on. And we have a responsibility as a community to push for more presence of trees, greater presence of the trees across the entire city. And clearly, the benefits in terms of climate resilience, addressing overheating in the urban environment, and carbon sequestration are part of that package as well. Thank you.
Good. Hey, well done. And I really enjoyed the history lesson of early Christchurch. So that was very inspiring. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Garth, please. And then we've got one more after Garth.
Good afternoon, Mr Mayor and councillors. You've heard a number of presentations that are virtually macro environmentally, but we're coming from the point of view of micro environments. So you received this extremely long document, but we see it as being extremely short on explaining how tree cover recommendations in the document are going to be delivered in an area such as ours, Central Riccarton, the area between Riccarton Road and Blenheim Road, and from the railway line to Matapo Street. We're particularly concerned that the so-called developers are going to be allowed to opt out, and in return, they just have to pay a sum of money unspecified. Now, the key issue is, how much money are they going to have to pay, and what's going to happen to that money if it's going to be used to plant trees somewhere else? Why aren't the trees going to be planted in the area they have been taken from? Now, Central Riccarton has been denuded of trees by these so-called developers. They have been allowed to come in and cut down every tree, every shrub, every bush, every blade of grass, and replace it with concrete and gravel and stone chips and some bark. So we've had 3 developments very close where there is actually no room for planting any trees at all. Double-storey developments. For example, in 17 Dewar Street, there were trees lining the western boundary and the eastern boundary. There was plenty of room to put in a development between the boundaries. But the first thing that happened was they were all cut down. Right? And what's happened? Okay, so a very fancy billboard was put up, enticing would-be buyers. Oh, it had trees on it. And a little note underneath saying, oh, the final may not appear exactly as this, right? And so there's not even a garage. There's actually only 2 car park spaces for 4 units. Now, the development could have taken place within the boundaries of those trees quite easily. But greed has overtaken the needs of the environment and the needs of the residents. So we're very concerned about this opt-out and also this idea that trees can be planted somewhere with the money, but where? So what? Areas like ours? They just remain treeless. That is not a good environment for people to live in.
Thank you, Garth. That's very clear. Has anyone got a question of Garth? No? Thank you very much for coming in. Good on you, bub. Okay. So the last one is Difford from Papua New Heritage Group. Welcome.
Tēnā koutou, ko David Williams, toko ingoa, no Papanui, toko kaianga. So the Papanui Heritage Group, I've been listed late on this, so sorry councillors keeping you away from your lunch. But I usually bike with a group called the Wednesday Wheelies on a Wednesday, and I've sacrificed that to be here today, so please take that into account. Pardon? No, I caught a bus. Yeah, so the Papanui Heritage Group, we're, I was told not to say advocacy, but we are advocacy from time to time. They're a group of people really interested in the Papanui area. People like my lecturer at university, Jim Gardner, started them off in 2001. This submission was put together by Margaret Lovell-Smith and Murray Williams, who told me that I had to be at 11:15 to speak, but here I'm at 11:20 speaking, so that's all good. I was really interested in one of the questions that came up because we're looking specifically at the memorial avenues as one of our big things, and communities can work together. In fact, a couple of Saturdays ago, we were all raking our burns to get the deciduous, sorry Colin, leaves onto the road, and then Monday the council comes and sweeps it all up, and it's all neat and tidy down there. So the Papanui Heritage Group, and I guess Papanui, in terms of the picture that Mark put up there, that the Papanui bush is obviously a very important part of our history, going back to pre-European times, Mahunga Kai Trail, and the Papanui, one of the meanings of Papanui are the platforms that mana whenua used to spear kiruru and other birds in that area. Though between the early years of settlement, that was, as was pointed out, very little forest there, so that was used for building. I think in the space of about 6 or 7 years, that whole timber town had removed the forest, and it was put up as created into a suburb. One of the pictures too is that you can get an impression. I worked for the press for a number of years, and visiting one of my former school students, Cashmere High, Kamala Hayman, and looking at her office in Gloucester Street, it does look like a forest. It looking to our house in Tomes Road, you would think that there was a continuous forest going right across the city. So that 70 acres was destroyed. Papanui, according to the plan, we are 15%, so we're doing pretty well. So you can probably get us up to 20 years really quick, Mr. Mayor. And I've put on your tables a invitation to the planting at, which was the old Bridgestone Firestone factory, and we've got an absolute, if some of you will have met him, I'm sure, Dennis McMurtry, who is pretty much a live wire. He's involved in various Papanui groups, including the Heritage Group and Rotary, and putting it together to show what we can as a city do in terms of the planting. So I think the Mayor is going to be there, so you're all invited to that. So we can get up to that 20% pretty quickly. I did like Colin's comments on the yellow on the kowhai, that that may be something that could happen down the memorial avenues, but please don't get rid of the deciduous trees first. A point that Margaret has made, and I guess it's very easy for us all being NIMBYs, not in my backyard. We've got a property next door to us that could be high-rise. The plans we've seen are a couple of double-storey houses, but who knows? And as pointed out in that video, that trees are actually an important part of our infrastructure. That's how they should be thought about, not nothing separate. So there are 15 memorial avenues, and in September 2022, the Papanui Heritage Group was delighted to learn that the city had recognised 15 Papanui memorial avenues through trees and plaques by adding them to the district plan schedule of significant historic heritage for protection. So those 15 avenues were planted by returned soldiers after World War II, so they're an important part of our heritage. However, they have not been entirely protected. right, Condell Avenue, trees were removed for a rest home at the Blythe Road end and not replaced, right? And that perhaps gives us a vision and a little bit of fear about what will happen to our area, such as the Cranford Basin, if there's a whole lot of housing that goes ahead in terms of us losing trees. So we'd like to raise a question about whether the council policies and plans are all compatible. So for example, the tree policy, the urban forest plan and the district plan changes for housing intensification. We have a concern that some of Papanui's tree-lined streets, including that adjoin the memorial avenues, may be vulnerable to developers. And as I stressed, we're a local group made up of individuals who have a sense of ownership, and as I say, come and meet Dennis McMurtry, who provides us with the muscle and enthusiasm. He does a lot of work with local schools, Papanui High School and Paparoa Street, who are right on the Rutland Reserve, and numerous plantings that he's done in both places there. Yep. So
thank you, and I'm looking forward to coming along.
Yep. Thanks.
Good. So thank you very much. It's right on time. So perfect. Okay. Thank you. So